Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's live stream where we'll be discussing the new skill pitches poll results. As you probably already know, the poll closed on Tuesday and sailing is the skill that we've chosen to go into refinement. So we're going to be going all over that in more detail, answering your questions about the poll and how we're planning to proceed. But first of all, the most important question of the day, how is everyone doing? I also forgot to do an introduction. I'm Mods Ayiza. I'll be your host today, and I'm joined by the wonderful Mod Elena and Mod Husky. And let's start with you, Elena. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great, thank you. Super stoked about sailing, honestly. I'm even wearing like blue to celebrate.
Really getting into the theme. I think I'm still hung up on a little bit of the shamanism wearing the green, but what can I say? How are you doing, Husky?
I am fantastic. So I just had a 2-week trip to Japan, part of the honeymoon. So this is the first week back from that, and yeah, it's just been, that was a great time and a great mood coming back to work. The break was definitely needed after all the work coming in for the new skill, and yeah, I guess I just didn't hate everyone in the community. That's not why I wasn't on Q&As and stuff. It wasn't like, oh, Husky did his thing and disappeared.
You
it was like, no.
there.
So yeah, looking forward to jump back into whatever the next steps for the new skill are, right?
Yeah, well, the next steps, there's certainly going to be a lot of them. We've got a lot of work to do still. It feels like every step in the process is a big one. So now, before we get into it, let's go over a few announcements. I just realized as well, if anyone is in-game at the moment and just got an in-game broadcast that sent you to an old blog, apologies. I gave Mod Goblin the wrong information for our broadcast info. So you might see another one come through, which will send you to the Twitch stream. Oops, these things happen. All right, announcements. Exclamation mark game update. This week's update included the beta for Desert Treasure 2 rewards, as well as the Ruinous powers. You can visit the beta worlds to try out a whole range of weapons, upgrades, armors, and prayers. You can read about everything there is to offer in the news post of exclamation mark game update. I've also got a little bit to talk about the Ruinous powers and rewards, generally speaking, in a moment. But next up, exclamation mark Discord. If you want to keep up to date with the latest on the new skill, join our new skill Discord, where you can check out feedback from other players that allow us to make the best skill we can. We're also hosting stage events there. We did our first one a few weeks back, which was extremely successful. We had over 1,000 members join us for a really cozy chat. Honestly, it was such a good experience, and anyone is able to join those when they're there, regardless of if you're a contributor into the Discord or not. But if you're not interested in it, we do provide summaries of conversations that have been ongoing, so you can look for those instead. And then last announcement for now is exclamation mark account. So in case you missed it last week, Jagex accounts are now in open beta. With multi-factor authentication and more complex passwords, you can keep all your characters in one secure place. So make sure to read the blog, especially before upgrading, as there are a few things you need to be aware of, but exclamation mark account for all of that. I've been using Jagex accounts for quite a while now. I love it, absolutely love it. Just the simplicity of one-click login is fantastic. You can use RuneLite on there, or the default client if you want, but if you're already using RuneLite, it should just appear. It will have all of your settings and stuff saved from your old installation as well. It just uses it through the launcher instead. So massive quality of life enhancements, but main focus really is around additional account security. So all good news there. Now, we have the sneak peek of the week to go over. So, if we can, this should bring up a nice before and after. So, I'll go into this in a moment. I've got like a little bit of a script that Goblin has wrote for me, and it talks about the prayers afterwards. But as you can see on screen, we've looked at reworking the prayer book icons based on a lot of your feedback. The before image on the left, after image on the right. Nice and tidy, much more cleaned up, a little bit different. I loved them before, but I also really love the new ones now. So hopefully you find those a little bit better. I believe that they'll be going into next week's game update. But yeah, to the script. Thank you, Goblin. The Desert Treasure 2 rewards beta opened up this week, and there's been a lot of feedback for us to go over and talk through as a team. Now, obviously, it's been a bit of a shorter work week due to Easter, and a few of our team members have been on holiday. So we're only able to make a handful of changes to the beta worlds next week, though we do obviously intend on changing much more than just those. There'll be a blog posted next week outlining some of the key points we've seen crop up, our plans and our thoughts on that, and what kind of feedback we'd love to see to help us get rewards into the best spot they can be. So keep an eye out for that. It should be early next week. What I can share with you right now, especially in the live stream format, is obviously, as you can see here, updated prayer icons. And the feedback was that many of you felt that the detail was great, but they were maybe a little bit busy or seemed cluttered by like things like the arrows, and you'd have preferred a simpler look. So hopefully this seems a little bit more simpler. There was also some feedback around the purple teal coloring, felt a little bit more archaeous than Zaros and suggested a different type of trim, more befitting of the fallen empire. So today, Mod West was best and put together an updated set of icons using your feedback that hopefully make things a little less intimidating while you're getting grips to the Ruinous powers. So we'll see. Fingers crossed they'll be able to go out next week, but if not, just know at least it's something that will be coming into the beta changes going forward, as well as a bunch of other bits. Now, the actual sneak peek of the week, what is coming out in next week's game update? Well, if we can load the next image, here it is. So what could this be all about? Well, the hairdressing interfaces will be getting a makeover, and so can you. So we first shared plans for this overhaul, makeover haul. I have to say that word. Goblin was very insistent on that in our last game jam, and it's now making its way to Gillinor. So you can select a whole host of brand new hairstyles in brand new colors, apply any hairstyle to any body type, and the only clipping occurring should be your new fresh trim. And you can see a few of these new hairstyles that have been shown on screen now, which look awesome. Very cool. Okay, all right. Let's see. Okay, so for the rest of the stream, let's talk about the skill, the poll. We've got some questions that we've already gathered since we saw the poll close on Tuesday. We want to address some of the most pressing points and topics that you have regarding it. But if you do have any other questions, please post them in chat at Oldschool RS, and our mods will try and get them to us, and we'll see if we've got time to answer them at the end of the stream. If not, they'll help inform future blogs and conversations that we have with you going forward. I felt like I've spoke a lot, and I'm probably going to speak a little bit more, and I'm sorry, but it will just be for this first question, which is, why didn't we poll Sailing and Shamanism against each other since they're so close? And then an additional question to that is, why aren't we looking to refine both skills? Maybe I'll save the both part to Elena and Husky as their developers, and they know a little bit more about what actually goes into refining. Well, I mean, we're all kind of on the same page, but still, I don't want to talk the whole time. So why didn't we? Well, if you remember back, and I know a few of you have because I've seen you post about it, the original blogs when we're talking about the skill process and how we'll approach it and the different stages, we said that we might end up being in a situation where we feel like we have to poll two skills against each other to get a result, unless there was a clear favorite. And if you look at the actual poll results, Sailing and Shamanism were actually really close. It's like a matter of 0.3% on the multiple choice, and then around about 4.5 or 5%, something like that, on the single voted choice. So super close. Now, I think, in all honesty, the reality is that we did discuss it. We did see it as a potential option, and we explored whether or not that was something that we should proceed with. But ultimately, the end of that discussion just concluded in, if we were to poll Shamanism and Sailing against each other, would we actually get a different result from what we're seeing right now? Or would we just be putting ourselves in the exact same position with the exact same problem and get stuck there for however long it may be until we go forward? Now, this is obviously discounting the fact that we could look at refining both skills and then presenting them together, but I'll let Elena and Husky talk to that in a moment. This is purely just about the fact of not polling them against each other. So yeah, we didn't want to... We've been really conscious from the start of this process that tribalism could occur, where, you know, players have a favorite skill pitch that they love, that they want to see added to the game, and other players have another favorite skill pitch that they love and want to see added to the game, and then suddenly you get to see a lot of very heated discussions happening on socials about which one should win, which one should go through. So what we really wanted to avoid was being in the situation where that just continues indefinitely. And we need to be at a point where we can just focus on one skill that players across the board seem pretty happy with. And when we looked into the data, which from the poll results, you can see that Sailing won, all by a small margin. albeit by a small margin even. So that's definitely correct. When you take into account the potential votes from those that voted Taming, it puts Sailing a little bit further ahead. When you look at people who voted just for Shamanism, but selected the multiple choice, it also puts Sailing a little bit further ahead. So overall, we felt like it was the safest choice for us to be able to go forward with a skill that the majority of players at least accepted, knowing that there's a pretty big sentiment risk involved for those that didn't want Sailing and wanted something else. I, being in the situation I am, community management, I hate that. I would love us to be be able to turn around and just do absolutely everything and make everyone happy all at once, but we can't all the time. So we want to go down the road of having a pitch that we felt like most people would be happy with, that we were confident with. Not that we weren't confident with Shamanism, it just adds extra to it. And then also remembering the fact that this isn't the skill that's being added to the game, at least not yet. We've still got that stage yet to come. And what is really important is the detail that comes out of Refinement. And Refinement is going to be lasting a few months. We're not going to be just jumping into presenting a fleshed out sailing design to you in 2 weeks' time. That's not realistic. It's more like 3, maybe even longer months, depending on how things go, depending on how much information we get back from you as you help us design it. So it's a really good opportunity for us to focus our efforts towards that, try and make Sailing the absolute best that it can be without the distractions and potential of being stuck in development limbo and not being able to make progress. So fingers crossed, over the course of the next few months, we can show you just how great Sailing could be, all the potential that it has to offer, and all the cool things that you want to see added to it, that we can also then come back to you and say, yeah, we can do that. That's pretty much it in terms of the why. Maybe now looking at the why we didn't poll them against each other, maybe now we could touch on the why we didn't refine both.
Sure. So you kind of touched on it as well, Ayiza, but I think the big thing is that this is Oldschool RuneScape's first new skill in 10 years. Like, this is a massive, massive project. And I think, at least going into Refinement, trying to juggle 2 projects at once is not ideal. This deserves our full attention, right? So even if we were to refine both, one would have to come first. And that's kind of where I'm sitting. Like, we're moving ahead with Sailing, and obviously, if people don't like it, after all that, then you can still vote no. But I hope that's not the case, because we have a really cool vision for what Sailing will be, and we strongly believe in it. So I hope that we can kind of work together and bring that vision to life, but also really take this time to nail down what the community wants Sailing to be. And I know it's not a good feeling when your favorite doesn't win, obviously. But I think a lot of people also underestimate exactly how big of a commitment it is for us to say that we're putting Shamanism in the backlog. That doesn't mean it's hidden somewhere in a cupboard, never to be reviewed again. That actively means that we're going to have a look at Shamanism. It might be quite far down the line, but that's not to say it's not happening. It is happening, just not yet.
I think as well, we had a lot of changes to polling process that were talked about a year ago, right? Where the whole point was to say, hey, let's talk to players ahead of time before we have these really fleshed out designs, right? Before we've got started development work, got all these mechanics in place and stuff. And that's been a thing we've done for, was it 9 years at that point, right? So players at this point are very used to expecting very fleshed out sort of things where, they can talk and nitpick about some of the details and give very specific feedback. And the point of the initial poll that we put to the players was really just to find out what flavor do you want your new skill, right? Because we got that initial vote to 80% plus support, and it's kind of like deciding, do you want to go to a pizza restaurant, to a steakhouse, or to somewhere for chicken, right? And you can argue about what do you want for food when you actually get there, right? Do we want to you have fillet steak? Do you want fries with it? Do you want a jacket potato? You know, all these things that are like very close details. But I think it's just something our players aren't very used to sort of feeling. So the idea, oh, well, just give us more information, and then, you know, we'll decide. I think that is going against the idea of the new polling system, especially with something like a new skill. If we were to refine literally everything in a new skill, which like to its absolute like smallest level of detail, we end up right back at where warding was, with a 40-page design document that is just very hard to digest. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe the analogy helps, maybe it doesn't. It's just people going, Husky, you're stupid, but hey. The
analogy certainly helped make me feel hungry. Thanks for that. Good job. Dinner's after the stream, right? Okay, thank you both for your questions. Really appreciate it. The next one is none of the skills got to 70% in the which concepts do you like question. What does this mean for the potential future of it being polled as a skill during the lock-in?
So, as I kind of said before, like in the last thing, they're very loose concepts and directions. So I think ultimately that does come with the knock-on of not having as much backing and support from players. Not to mention the fact that we were pitting them against each other. It probably happened both ways, right? There were people who exclusively like wanted sailing, probably would have been happy with shamanism as a new skill and just said, no, I'm going to no vote, or vice versa, right? So I don't think like this poll necessarily it can be treated with exactly the same as a poll that requires 70% threshold, and that's why we never framed it as such because that's going to come later. That's the green light poll. That's after refinement. So while it would have been nice if, you know, all 3 pitches had 80% approval and we were just choosing between people's favorites, I think that would have been unrealistic. And at least when it comes to the future of the skill and refinement, I'd at least hope that players work with us on that journey to make sure that sailing is the best skill it can be, can look at all the design, help nitpick through all some of the details, things you like, things you don't like, and then hopefully with that full picture in mind, months from now, we can then decide, is this something that we want to be in the game? So hopefully that makes sense. I would envision that a more fleshed out proposal anyway would get more votes, right?
Yeah, exactly. So just to confirm, like main takeaway from that one is that there will be a question during lock-in that requires 70% yes for sailing to be added to the game. When we've finished refinement and we finally come out with the fully fleshed out design, that question will be asked. And if it doesn't hit 70% yes, then sailing won't be added at that point. And that's when we've got options. We can either look at refinement again if we feel like we just really missed the boat on a certain aspect of sailing. That was so good. Sorry. It was so bad that it was good. Or we could just completely ditch sailing entirely, dead in the waters, and move over to shamanism instead. Or something completely new. Maybe people will love Taming by the time that they've seen the sailing pitch that we do that. But you will eventually be asked for a yes-no question that requires 70% before it will be added to the game. Is there anything you wanted to add to that at all, Elena?
No, I think it's pretty straightforward, really. It's a traditional good old yes-no vote. Like, it's, yeah. I'm excited for refinement. Like I was saying to Husky earlier today, so far, a lot of what we've been doing is not really traditional dev work where we develop or design something and then go develop it immediately. This has been a really long process of just talking to the community, a lot of back and forth, us doing a bit of design and then going, you know, presenting it and adjusting according to feedback. But I feel like the majority of that time has been spent talking to the community rather than actually designing and developing, which we're normally doing. And this refinement stage is finally, I suppose, our opportunity to really dig into those skills and get to design a bit, dig a bit deeper. So I'm really stoked about that. And I hope that the community can kind of... Obviously, that doesn't mean that we're going to stop talking to you guys. We're obviously still going to do that as well. But hopefully we can, you know, come up with something awesome together in that time.
Heck yeah. Well, I'm very excited for it. It's such a great moment when we get over one hurdle and then start building up towards the next one. And this
Yeah.
is definitely the biggest one by far. Okay, so talking about refinement, we had a question from Gentle Tractor actually in the New Skill Discord, and they asked, do you have a rough plan for how you'll be approaching the refinement stage? What level of community collaboration will you be looking for here?
We don't have a plan currently. We actually are planning to do that tomorrow. We're all heading into the office, having a bit of an on-site, and I think that's going to be quite exciting. And the reason we don't have a plan is because refinement for each of the skills looked very different, right? While they all need refined, they might need refined in certain ways. There might be some parts of a pitch that are very solid, need left alone, other things that really do need still fleshed out, explained, or unknown aspects that need decided upon. Generally, though, my current thoughts going into tomorrow's sort of on-site meeting is we probably want to do some sort of survey to collect information from players right now and find out the problems that they have with sailing as a pitch. We're probably going to try and make use of that through a number of channels. We quite like the Discord chats. We've got the players who are on the Discord server that we can look to for information. We have Q&As, we have Gazette blogs, we have all these things that we can use to sort of put information out and get information back in. We obviously have a proposal at some point for, hey, here's our pitch, for like a refined pitch, and then we can have players like sort of give us a feedback back and forth and hopefully land on something that is going to be a really good, exciting skill pitch that we can look to follow. So refinement is something that as well, it's not going to quite be like refinement for other projects. And this is the thing that's kind of really hard. And to give an example, it'd be like, if we said that, cool, we have these islands and this is a reward space for sailing, right? Access to these islands. It's not really important for refinement to say there's going to be 2 islands that have bosses. One of them's a group boss. It's going to drop these items. It's going to, like, with a skill being so massive, there's a level of detail that just cannot be there. But there are things we do need to iron out. Things like the actual like core gameplay, the actions like that you do to get XP, what kind of size of the skill that we want to release, like what sort of content updates players want to be part of it, how they envision certain ship customizations working. This is all stuff that's really good, but like say specific rewards, when the skill is hopefully greenlit, we can look to haul certain things more traditionally moving forward, right? Like, hey, here's an idea for a piece of content that we ship alongside sailing. Give us your feedback and thoughts, and here are our suggested rewards from it. So I think it's going to be a little bit different from how players might expect, and that's the balance that we're going to have to try and hit in refinement anyway. We can't be vague anymore like we were with a pitch, because the pitch, as I said, was, do you want a pizza, or do you want steak, or do you want like curry or chicken, right? You could just go general, very general, sell people on the dream, and sometimes like just like generally, I'm not feeling boats is a not good enough reason, or I'm not feeling production skill is a good enough reason at the early stage. Now is the chance to really delve into the details, So
I think you raised a really good point of like the refinement stage maybe not being what players are typically used to right now. We're also not used to it either. This is the first time we've added a new skill to the game, so it's very new to us. Hence why Husky's comment of like not really having a plan. We've intentionally left it relatively loose so that we can adapt on the fly based on obviously which skill went ahead into refinement, and then exactly how reactions have been perceived, and the initial first few weeks are going to really help shape us, shape the rest of the weeks going forward. General plan though is yeah, we knew that we would need to highlight certain things in refinement. So that was something that I know that Elena and Husky, you've both been working hard on this week to really dig into the details of, okay, what have we seen from the consultation phase during the pitch process? What were the main concerns players had with sailing as a skill? And how can we identify solutions to those, or present solutions to those, or ask for solutions to those during refinement? So that was one of like the key things for us, and that was really made possible by all of the fantastic feedback that we got over the last month or so. So thank you everyone who helped with that. And then yeah, tomorrow we're gonna have a big meeting, and we're gonna talk more about the intricacies of like going forward, timings of when we're gonna hit certain blogs, and the ways that we're gonna approach things, when we want to do the next stage, when's the next live stream, do we want to do some video content, stuff like that going forward. So yeah, but back to that point of what to expect, as Husky mentioned, it's like refinement now is kind of similar to what you would expect the green light to be on content that we're typically polling. So like Desert Treasure 2, for example, we simply just said, do you want a quest with 4 repeatable bosses? And then once that got greenlit, we polled individual rewards like the new armors, the weapon, and the prayer book. So I imagine we'll be in a similar situation when it comes to the end of Refinement. You'll have a pretty fleshed out design of what sailing is trying to achieve as a skill, with some examples of activities, maybe examples of rewards, certain areas that might be unlocked, or just new places that you can explore as part of sailing being added. But every single individual detail won't be there. We don't want to give that to you straight away because we want the skill to be exciting on release, but also because, again, it comes down to this point of there's no point of spending a load of time developing things that you just don't want. So if sailing doesn't make it through the lock-in stage and be the skill that gets added to the game, we'll have just wasted all that time. So we'll try and give you as much info as we can without spending too much time on our side that could just end up going nowhere, because we'll have so many opportunities after the lock-in stage to poll individual aspects like specific rewards, what interactions should happen, if there's a new sailing outfit that gives experience, what should that experience percentage be and for which skill, for example. Those really finer details we can lock in, but we'll give you examples beforehand. So we could say that, it could come with an outfit. There could be 3 islands, 2 new bosses, a mini game, 5 activities, and these are the activities that you can get, you can do, for example. Hopefully that made sense without too much chatting. All right, next question. You've mentioned before that this is the first of the new skills. Does this mean for future pitches there's a chance for shamanism to be pitched again? If so, would you offer it in the next pitch, or would you prefer to offer 3 brand new pitches instead? I think you covered this a little bit already, Elena, so you want to take this one up again?
Yeah, sure. So, I believe what we said in our statement on Tuesday was that it's in the backlog. And what that means is that we will revisit it at some point. That's not to say it definitely happens if sailing fails to poll, for example. I don't know how far back we'll go to the drawing board then, like if we come up with some other pitches as well, potentially. What we mean by it's in the backlog is we are going to revisit it and we are going to have a proper look at it. That could be after, say that sailing does pass. That could mean we keep working on sailing, we develop it fully, we release it, and then we're like, cool, so you have a new skill. Do you want another? Shamanism.
Let's go.
Let's go.
I think there's also, it depends how we get there, right? If we get to the point where sailing doesn't make it through the green light, maybe we start asking players, cool, would you, any way we approach this, I think even though shamanism is in the backlog, it's still important to retouch bases with players and go, hey, would you like us to have an existing skill that we've already talked about, further refined as part of as repitched again, or would you like us to come up with something entirely new? I'm not opposed to just letting the players decide. I mean, say the line that I said in the pre-recorded Q&A for thing, but this has to be a skill this designed by the community for the community, right? That's why every single step of the way we're asking you guys, what do you want, getting your opinions. All of this that you've seen about a new skill from now on, was behind closed doors from Warding, right? It was months of developers designing stuff, coming up with ideas and stuff. And it's I think having the community on board and just going, hey, do we put it left or right? Cool, go down left path. Or, that's the important part for me, And I think that the community, everybody knows this, but some people are just gonna. It is what it is, right? It's the whole tribalism thing. It's there are a bunch of people in the community who are really happy that sailing passed. No wonder it did come out ahead in the polls. There are going to be a bunch of people who are really unhappy that their favorite didn't win, and there are going to be a bunch of people who are just hey, we didn't want a new skill, you're ruining the game, and that's fine. We all have our own opinions, and but this is why we're putting these results out, right? If we thought that the majority of people thought we were ruining the game with a new skill, we wouldn't be doing it. If we thought, it's just all these things. So I think people have different opinions. It's a very common sense thing to think that, but it's important to remember that sometimes the loudest people aren't necessarily the most people, because that's why the poll's we had 170k people vote in that, right? So
it was a big poll, yeah. But you're right. I mean, working in community generally, we typically see the most time people are chatting is when they have something that they're not happy about, which makes sense, right? You want to be heard when you're not so happy. And I have really disliked seeing so many people unhappy about the result because they preferred a different skill option. I'm just hopeful, like I said earlier, that we can show you that we really believe that we can make something good of this skill, and whilst it might not be your favorite, maybe it will then eventually turn into your favorite, and then we'll use what we've learned from this for all future skill editions if there are any going forward. So yeah, we shall see. Okay.
If I could just shoot in real quick as well, I'd just like to say that if you are one of those people who don't like sailing, then tell us why. Because that is the best way you can influence sailing into becoming what you want it to be. Like, if you're like, oh, I don't like sailing because I think you're gonna make it like Bon Voyage. Yeah, we probably don't want to make it clunky like that either. But tell us that, you know? That's just an example off the top of my head, but tell us that so we know what you want and help us shape it into the skill that you want.
I had this like thought to one of the questions later on. I maybe jumping the gun a bit, but it seems quite relevant now. Is there are a lot of very opinionated people in the community who seem to have a very clear idea of exactly what sailing is and why they don't like it. Such a clear idea. It's a clearer idea than any of us on this stream right now, because our whole process is all about making sure that the community is the ones that decide it, right? They're like, oh my god, it's going to be instance, and it's going to be mini games, and it's going to be this. And it's like, what if we just didn't make it like that, right? Like, and you know, what if we put it to you guys and said, hey, do you want this approach or this approach, and brought you guys along the way? I think that getting upset about things, it's just going to be like this when that hasn't even been decided yet, doesn't make a lot of sense to me, right? And I think that this is one of those things that I just kind of hope the community can get over biases with like previous skill pitches. I think I see a lot of stuff like sailing is a meme skill, and I'm like, what does that even mean, right? What determines that something is not a skill and is instead a meme? What, like, sometimes some of the best ideas can come from something that sounds really silly, but then you think, well, actually, let's take some of the silly stuff, and what if it was really serious, right? What if we thought about the potentials with sailing and how we can make this a reality? I mean, being a sailor is a skill in real life, right? Like, it takes skill to manage a ship. I think that's something that players have said things like, oh, it's just going to be click an interface and go things and get rewards like player-own ports in RuneScape. Like, well, it's not going to be that. Oh, you're just going to generate an instance based on like selecting a bunch of options, and then now you're in that instance. Well, that's not what we've said either, and that's not certainly what my plans are for it to be, right? So all of these things, I'm like, let us know what's important for sailing to be a skill for you guys, right? Like, is it really, like, one of the things I brought up in the initial like pre-recorded pitch was like, are you the ship or are you on the ship? And I've seen so many opinions from people like, it needs to feel like I'm clicking things on a ship, like steering the wheel, controlling the mast. And then other people have been like, oh yeah, well, you should definitely be a ship, and I'm all about like the journey and all these things. So, and these are things that are just completely undecided. So if you've got this preconceived notion about like, it's exactly like this and this is why I hate it, I'm struggling to see where we've said it's going to be exactly like that, personally.
I think it's understandable, though, why people would feel that way. Because when you give a vague pitch to someone and you don't fill in all the details, people are naturally going to fill in the details, like, within their mind. So
yep.
I think it completely makes sense that people draw those conclusions. And that's kind of why we're addressing it now, to just remind you that it's not set in stone. We can still change things.
And even if we come out with a refined pitch that's like, hey, here's our take on it. We've made a decision. This is exactly what it's going to be. And players go, we hate that. We'd be really stupid to continue with it, right? You know what I mean? We should probably, like, and I've seen a bunch of, threads and discussions saying like, oh, I've seen this as a common gripe with sailing, and here's how I'd fix it. And I love reading those because it's such a better way to frame it, right? I saw people talk about taming and like, oh, I just don't want pets to be everywhere. And I'm like, well, cool. What if these creatures that you had were at specific areas? Is that the design that you like? Because then the feedback might be, I really like taming as long as there isn't overworld clutter. And it's like, cool. That's a cool piece of feedback, and not I hate it and it's going to ruin the game because of this. Because that's not decided yet. So I don't know. It's been a long ramble about specifics and stuff, and I think that my only sort of plea to the community is don't get hung up on specifics. Like, if you think it's possible for the skill to work in a way that doesn't have that specific, let us know. Let us know why you don't like a certain specific and what you would change about it, or things like that, and help us work to make this skill better. Because that is refinement and what's gonna move on, right? So, because 80% of you want a new skill in the game, that's irrefutable. And if you're just generally excited about the hype of a new skill, help us work to make it the best it can be. Like, that's what I'm excited about.
I'm just excited to go around on my boat now. Like, I'm full on the sailing train. Just derailing things. All right, we've got one last general question, and then I really want to dig into some of the actual sailing specific ones, because maybe we can discredit some of those misconceptions that are out there at the moment. This one is in regards to taming. Now, taming wasn't very popular compared to shamanism and sailing, but it's quite clear that there's a fair bunch of players out there who did like the pitch. And then they go on to say, could it be considered for an expansion of Hunter instead of an entirely new skill like Forestry is for woodcutting? Prepare the Husky ramble.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk about this because I saw this so much. Like, you know, I'm on my honeymoon, supposed to be switched off from work and, you know, not doing it. But I couldn't help but, like, look at threads and discussions about it when I'm, you know, late at night and she's sleeping and stuff, and I'm supposed to be sleeping too, right? Because everything was coming out like really late in Japan time. But
Husky, you know that story you told me of like the cherry blossom trees? I'm now repicturing you sat on a bench with your phone out, just like feeling all majestic and like completely zen, reading through Reddit, scrolling as the petals just blow past you, like, I can't wait to talk about this taming topic on the next live stream.
Taking little notes on his phone and stuff, you know?
Yeah. So here's my take on the whole expansion thing, because I think that sometimes players don't like a pitch and they go, oh, like, taming isn't a skill because it's just an expansion of Hunter, and oh, shamanism is a skill, it's an expansion of Herblore, right? And I think that those, if you did it that way, you severely reduce and limit exactly what that content is. So, and not to mention the fact that I think that on Taming and Hunter specifically, they're very different definitions, right? Someone who's going out and hunting a creature is doing something very different from someone who's going out and taming a creature, right? One's about using the creature as a resource, and one's about working with the creature and utilizing its skills, right? I think that Hunter blurs the lines a little bit because there's an NPCs that have like tamed creatures that you can use to hunt, and that's something that I definitely see as being like related, you know, through history people have tamed dogs and then used dogs for hunting, right? That's a very clear example. But to me, that just says that these two skills have a lot of potential that they can use to work together in some ways. And I think that this whole thing is like, it would feel really weird for someone who has just, say, I don't know, used a bunch of bird snares or caught a bunch of salamanders or something, and suddenly they skip right to the end of having tamed they can suddenly tame a black dragon and use it for this dungeon, right? Like this maybe specific dungeon that we have that you can only enter with your black dragon pambler. And that just feels like, it feels like that journey of starting and taming something small and working your way up to something big is something that is only captured by a skill, that like sort of nested progression system. And if you take that away, if you just make an expansion to Hunter, I think you lose a lot of the details on what was a skill pitch. And I think the same for Shamanism, right? I think Shamanism was a lot more than Herblore, and just because you've made a bunch of ranging potions, you're suddenly a master of the spirit realm? Like, that just sounds ridiculous to me. So, I don't know, like, I think that this sort of simplification of it, I think that it doesn't help that in this specific example, Hunter is quite a lacking skill. It's actually probably got some of the most diverse set of training methods, right? There are so many different ways to train Hunter, and a lot of them are just dead content, which really sucks. You know, they release with so much stuff that people just don't do. And I think Hunter deserves love. I just don't think taming is the answer to that. So, yeah. I think that sometimes people just, when they want to discredit an idea, grab low-hanging fruit, and this seemed like a, yeah, like, don't vote yes to taming, it's just Hunter expansion. It's like, no, it's a bit more complicated than that.
I don't see it as that, actually. I see it as people really liked parts of taming, and they just want it in the game without having to go through, 6 months of community consultation first.
I was going to say the
Also-
same. I think people are just excited for content and loved specific aspects of taming that they would want to see in the game sooner rather than later. And with it being the last option, probably just clutching at straws more than anything else to get it added as an expansion. So
I don't know. I think that I think I didn't like all the hate that Taming got, because while I did the sailing video and stuff with the pitch, like Taming was my favorite skill. Taming was the one that I wanted to be in the game the most. So it is what it is. Like obviously, like the whole point of putting things in front of the community is moving in the direction they want, and I'm happy we're moving with sailing. But yeah, I think
so
that,
you were the one on Reddit. Now it's all making sense. Now, whilst you're in Japan on the bench with the cherry blossoms, you weren't at peace. You were angry on your alt account. All right, let's talk about sailing because we've got some questions in here and we've got like 15 minutes. So let's see what we can get into. First question, pretty big one. How are we looking to unite the community around sailing?
well, if you have any suggestions,
Okay,
Well,
I think. Oh, go on. Do you want to go, Elena?
I was gonna say we talked about this earlier actually, that we have a big meeting tomorrow to go over exactly this, like how we are going to discuss with you all about our strategy for sailing. Obviously the poll just closed on Tuesday, so we're still figuring things out ourselves, and we have a lot of questions to answer thanks to all your feedback on things that you want to know about sailing. And so we kind of need to come up with proposals before we take them to you guys and ask, do you like this? Yes or no? Ultimately, I guess the answer is we want to unite the community behind sailing by making it awesome. And we want to work with you guys to do that.
Well said.
I think it just,
Truer words have never been spoken.
and it's just everything we've been saying here as well. Like to me, it's just all about like convincing people to not have made their minds up already, right? Have people be open to everything. All we could do is like, I don't know, I'm just really excited to be talking about sales finally. We pent up, shut up for 2 months, months about it, and haven't been able to join in the last 2 weeks. So, yeah.
We have a long time during a refinement to work through so many of the different issues, concerns, whatever else may have been brought forward by the community, and we're hopeful that during that time, just by process of following the process, we'll be able to unite the community. Like if we are able to pull out an awesome skill that addresses all of the concerns that you've raised with us, what more can we do to unite players? At the end of the day, it's if you really just don't like sailing because you hate the idea of it, when we've presented what I hope is going to be a pretty darn decent kind of like design for it, then fair enough. But hopefully that doesn't happen. So now that's another big question. These are all pretty big questions actually for sailing. All right. One of the biggest issues that we've seen players talk about in regards to sailing is the core gameplay loop. So if we look at something like Shamanism, it was a lot easier to highlight potential core gameplay loops, whereas with sailing, it's not as easy. So what are we going to be doing about this?
I think this is a byproduct.
Oh.
On you go.
Yeah, you go. You go.
Sure. I think this is a byproduct of it being shamanism was a gathering production skill. And gathering and production skills, for the most part, work in much the same ways. You've got a repeatable process to gain materials. There's various nodes across the game, that kind of thing. And, obviously producing, you go to a ritual circle. Like people already understand how these work. So they already understand where the XP drops are coming from and all this kind of thing. I think that utility skills are much more varied and unclear for the most part. So this is definitely an area of sailing that we discussed a lot before the pitches, and we felt like it wasn't necessarily important to get hard stuck on where exactly is the XP coming from. I know we touched on you could just be doing activities at sea and getting sailing XP, but I've also seen criticism about that. So I think this is something that we definitely need to have as a focus moving on in Refinement. I think it's something that will definitely help cement sailing as a skill to those who don't think it currently is, because they can't see where you're getting XP from. So yeah, I think this is something that we need to focus on, definitely.
100%. I think we also tended to perhaps over-design shamanism compared to taming and sailing a little bit, just because of the nature of them. So taming and sailing are kind of intuitive, in the sense that I say taming, you think of animals. I say sailing, you think of the sea. If I say shamanism, people have different associations, and I can't speak, sorry, associations. There we go. And because the training loop in shamanism is brand new, and because of the mysterious nature of it, we felt like we needed to go a step further and explain that whole training loop a bit better. In retrospect, maybe we should have done that with taming and sailing as well. But what we really tried to convey was more so the idea, the thematic of something. Our next steps now is to really refine and dig deep into, okay, how do you actually do this thing?
Mm-hmm. Cool.
That just leads into the whole discussion about shamanism's name, right? Which was something we went over a ton, and I know you discussed in the Discord chats, and people saw on Reddit, here's our list of names for it, and it felt like something we really needed. It definitely felt like something that needed explained because it wasn't clear, even if that was still the best name we felt like would be understandable at a pitch stage.
Sorry, someone asked me to show my mug of water. Remember to stay hydrated, it's very important. Okay, similar question, but maybe we'll get different answers. Good job, Elena, proud of you. It feels as if people are more excited about the parts of sailing that aren't the actual sailing parts, but rather things like islands, the potential for more area expansion. What are we going to do to convince players that it's actually fun to sail?
This kind of ties into what we just said, right? We haven't focused that much on how you actually train it. And that's on us, you know? You're just filling in the gaps of things that you don't know because we've not said them yet, and that's completely fine. Our next goal is to fill in that gap and really dig deep into how you train it. We'll probably still touch on rewards and refinement, but I would say we should probably focus more so on the training methods, and really nail that down.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of like talked about all the different potential activities and going over which ones we might want to drill down into a little bit more to actually show you the fun side of sailing, as opposed to just this idea of navigating across the sea mindlessly, like as if you're walking around without the ability to teleport in main game, which does not sound fun at all. So it's definitely on our radar, something that we're really keen to focus on. All right, I'm conscious of time. We've got a few more questions to get through here, so let's ask this one, shall we? A few people have said this now. I don't know. Not as many have said about it in regards to all, but at least some. But the question is all new content going to be locked behind sailing? I think I can safely say
yes.
no. Oh, okay.
Yes, you're going.
Okay.
You're going to need 99 sailing to breathe. It's going to be that sort of ingrained in everything you do in the game.
Are we adding oxygen levels into RuneScape? We're going to become a survival game?
But no, honestly, I think that in terms of like locking content behind content is the literal game. Like if you start off on Lumbridge, it's just a web of things that you need to do to unlock, and if something as big as a skill should probably add like another web layer to that. And if it makes sense, you know, if you're out on an island somewhere, maybe like now instead of us like just having NPCs that take you there, maybe there's a sailing requirement, but that doesn't necessarily need to be a hard and fast either. I think for the most part, it comes down to what's the target audience for this content. And even when it comes to skilling requirements for content, especially access to like a quest or like access to a boss, we tend to be a bit on the lower side. I think TOA was probably the most ambitious thing so far with like the amount of quests that you needed to do and the challenge of the combat encounters there. Even things like Sins of the Father has been quite bad, to be honest, for like the level of difficulty, but like it's like Sepulchre and like vampire tasks and Veiled Mining, so it's not massive content for like a lot of people. And that kind of made sense anyway for the target audience of like the content, right? You know, Hallowed Sepulchre is probably not content for people who like are very fresh to the game, right? So I don't know. I think like content locked behind content is fine. I think we would just decide moving forward what would be part of sailing, what wouldn't be. as makes
Yeah,
sense.
I
But
think
to
Community will probably
reiterate,
tell us if
it's
we're wrong.
yeah, to reiterate though, it's not like every single content, every type of content that comes out in the future is going to be locked behind sailing. There's still a vast game with lots of other scope for content.
Yeah, and
The
I
cool
like
part about
as far
this-
as
I say, what if
Oh, yeah.
you didn't need the sailing level and you just needed someone to take you there, right? Like if we're an MMO after all, right? There's a difference between like the levels of like sailing content locks that it is, right? Or I don't know. I'm just spitballing ideas here, you know.
oh, so your idea of a courier, we can be like boat taxi people. I'm going to ferry people across to the new island after I've got my sailing level. That actually sounds pretty cool. I just wanted to quickly touch on content being locked though, and obviously the question says, is all new content going to be locked behind sailing? No. Some new content might be. We might have content that's specific to sailing. There may be a new quest that comes out that has a sailing requirement associated to it, but I don't believe, at least I've not heard of it, that would be like going back to retroactively change any content to incorporate sailing. So all of the requirements for everything that exists as current would still stay the same. We could probably do some cool things like add an alternate requirement, so you could either have this I don't know what level of something or this level of sailing instead and still be able to achieve the same thing. Or maybe you don't have to, I don't know, repair Ned's ship and instead you use your own, but you still have to collect the map to be able to get to Crandor, things like that as alternates. But it wouldn't be like a hard fast change. And honestly, I don't see that as being a priority for adding in the new skill to begin with. They're more like things that we could look at doing after it's been released to kind of integrate it more into the world. So yeah, going forward, some new content will be locked behind it probably, but not everything. Okay,
That's a
next
topic
question.
for refinement, actually. Like we have that as a hard topic of how do we integrate it
Yeah.
with the world and how do we make sense of it, because the world has existed without sailing. So putting something new in, and this happens with every piece of content that we put into various scales, right? But something as much as a skill, things need to make sense without it, right? And like, with it now existing as an option, because otherwise it just feels like it's not connected to the game world. So that is something we are going to look at in refinement and something that we're going to be discussing with the community. And we don't have answers to that, right? As you said, there are solutions though, right? Whether it's anything from do nothing to alternatives to explain it in just now there's an extra line of dialogue in the quest that makes sense as to why you wouldn't be able to sail there yourself, right?
Exactly. All right, so are you concerned about the scope of sailing?
Yes. I think that
Oh yeah, go on.
the important thing about these skill pitches at this point was to sell the dream. And I think sailing had the biggest dream, if you know what I mean, in terms of, like, if players are expecting, like, 10 bosses and raids 4 and, like, 10 new skilling methods and 20 new quests, and theoretically you could see that being part of it, that's probably not what we're going to offer because we'll be here 10 years from now, right? Especially because most of that would have to be Paul and stuff. So I think that we definitely want to make sure that, again, like I keep saying it's in refinement, but like I think it's important to tell players what we are going to discuss in refinement and whatnot, and the scope of the content release is an important thing for us to handle, where our priorities lie. And let's say we'll do the sea expansion, we'll have the core gameplay loops, we'll have a couple methods of training it, and hey, here's, you know, a list of activities that could launch with sailing. Maybe we ask the community to help sort of prioritize, like, which ones do we tackle first and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think sailing has a massive potential scope, but I also don't think the skill, we've always said from the start, the skill shouldn't be finished on release. Like, in terms of, like, it's finished so no new content could ever fit into it ever again, right? I think it shouldn't come out as a half-assed, incomplete project. That's not the vision. We want it to feel like a fully fleshed piece of content. But I think that there are a lot of cool ideas for sailing that could theoretically be like further expansions to it, right? And that would have been the same for anything, because I think the spirit realm in shamanism was scary as well. With, like, we kind of saw it as being anywhere from, hey, here's a few hotspots where you interact with the spirit realm, maybe a few niche places around the game world. But players were also saying, hey, like, it's literally Gillenor 2.0, right? Which basically releasing a new MMO along with the skill, which is probably a bit too far-fetched, and there were probably middle grounds in between where we figure out what the players want and all this. So, yeah, I think that isn't something unique to sailing, but I think sailing definitely seemed like it had some of the biggest potential, especially because of that. Like, you think of how much sea there currently is, right? And trying to fill that enough with content.
I think a big challenge there will be to make it feel, I guess, engaging enough, because it's a big expansion to a big, I was going to say land mass, but it's not really land, but a big area expansion. It's important that it feels like there is stuff out there and that you don't have to go for ages until you find something. We know that was a criticism for Zaya on launch, right? That it felt like a big continent with not much in it. That's not really what we want to do with sailing. And maybe the solution is you unlock smaller parts of the sea that are otherwise locked off, because south of you there's a storm, and west of you there are shallows that you can't pass. But maybe eventually you can build a tougher hull on your ship, and then you can sail across those shallows and you can reach a new area on the sea. I think there's a lot we can do there in terms of locking it off so it's not too big, while still having it feel fulfilling.
I think that's a really, really good point, actually.
And this is like, the question was, are you concerned? And I think we would be stupid to not be concerned, because we're asking ourselves, hey, when you release this skill in the distant future, right? I don't want to give exact timelines yet. We don't know what state we're going to be in at that point, right? I mean, if we're in a point where I think the skill, like as a team, we don't think the skill is enough content, we're going to delay it further, but we don't know where that threshold is, right? And it's going to be, you know, I think that it's basically a theoretical question about asking, you know, how much scope is it going to be, and it's really hard to say at this point, right?
Yeah, I think the main takeaway from this though is that we're confident that we can make it work. We did we wouldn't have gone into pitching it if we didn't feel like we could at least make it a skill that was enjoyable. It was one of the main pillars of our designs for approaching a new skill, right? It has to feel enjoyable and rewarding to train. So yeah, concerned but confident is the best way to put it. My concern personally is more around what players are going to expect from a finished skill versus what we will deliver. And that's where a lot of, again, work during this refinement stage is clearly detailing that and offering up the ability for players to know what might come for the future of sailing versus what might come from the release. I think, Husky, you mentioned about not expecting a new raid to drop at the same time as sailing, right? We want the focus to be on releasing a fun, playable skill with plenty of content that's related to it. And adding in like a new raid alongside that release, well, look at Tombs of Amaska and how long that takes to put together. It's not going to be realistic to expect that on top of developing all the systems and everything else for a new skill, but it will be filled with a whole bunch of content that makes sense all the way through to level 99, because that's what's going to make a good skill. And the scope worry for me is more, how long do we then spend on sailing going forward? Because you could probably add content to it for the rest of time. I mean, that's the hope, right? Because that's why we're adding them, just like we add new things into the game now. Generally about scope, though.
Thing there as well.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I thought you were done with it.
It's okay.
Cool. So in our big meeting tomorrow, where we kind of flesh out what we want to proceed with in refinement and the big areas that we need to refine further, we'll also have Engine there to kind of discuss with them what's feasible and what's possible to do. And I think that's really plays into the scope of sailing as well, and a concern that we saw a lot with the community is like, oh no, they're never getting engine support, it can never feel good to sail the seas. That's not true, and we're excited to see exactly what we can do, because we can do some pretty cool stuff. So excited.
We definitely can. The last thing I was going to wrap up with in terms of scope generally was just that I feel like that same concern around scope existed for all three of the skills, because you could think of so many ideas that we'd thought of, and then that the players brought forward that we hadn't thought of, that was something like, that's actually really cool, we could add that. and you could just keep on going and going and going, right? Taming had so much potential. Shamanism had so much potential with Spirit Realm dungeons or new quests that exist within the Spirit Realm entirely. Taming with dungeons just for your companions to explore through, or completely new areas that you have to use your companion for, and so on and so forth, like Slayer tasks, Shamanism with totems that could be placed down, act as a thrall. Literally, the scope concern was there for all three of them, because we gave such open-ended kind of like concept level pitches. So yeah, the main takeaway though from it all is that we're confident we can make it work. So that's good. All right, I have time for one last question. Hopefully, I won't get told off by Modspear. We were a little bit late starting, my fault also. But this last one here is in regards to screen clutter. So one of the main issues we saw players have with Taming was the potential for screen clutter. Do we have any ideas for how we'd prevent this for ships out at sea?
So it's an interesting question, right? Because I've also seen the take that sailing is going to be a solo activity where you never see or interact with anyone, apparently, right? And then other players concerned about the clutter at sea from too many ships. I think that it comes down to how are the actual ships going to work. Like, can you have two ships that overlap with each other? Now, if players are transformed into ships and they're, say, you know, maybe anywhere from like really small, like 1x1 to like 5x5 or whatever, and you're sort of collide, players are used to that experience in MMOs, right, where things overlap. And at that point, like, yeah, there could be clutter, but if ships can't occupy the same space, or they're bigger, or like you're not the ship but you're on a ship, then we need to think about how that works. We want to talk with Engine to figure out, like, that's what the meeting's motto is. Like, early discussions were cool, that seems possible, yeah, that would be cool. But like, also let us know what you like, because what you want, because that's something in the surveys I want. I don't know which direction to go into, right? When it comes down to gameplay loops, I've thought of like a couple for each of them, but I don't actually know which direction to go in. And I think players seem to be split. I've seen both takes, so yeah, I think that the clutter at sea, I don't know, like, I feel like at that point just sail away if there's too much clutter. I think that generally blocking might be a bad idea, because
just close your eyes.
Just if you're blocking and you can't like sail through other people, then how does that work, right? Because like, are you just gonna have like people make a wall of ships and require that you pay to get through? I don't know. It's an MMO, people would do that, so yeah, I don't know.
I think again, it just comes to one of those things that we need to figure out during refinement. In terms of ideas right now, it's more just that we know it's a problem. We need to figure out what solutions are possible. And as Elena said, we've got Engine with us in our meeting tomorrow, so fingers crossed we'll be able to figure out some initial kind of like ideas and proof of concepts that we can then explore further, share them with you, see how you feel about it, see if that's something that we should progress with or whether we should change it entirely. And then yeah, eventually lead to having it all into the design. There's so many of those areas, right, that we need to really just nail, and that's what Refinement's meant to be for. Sorry, Husky.
What I will, yeah, I want to talk about that as well, because like we keep saying, oh, that's what Refinement's for and stuff, but exactly the tactile way that ships interact and exist in the game world is like the most important part of sailing, right? It's also the sort of thing we need to get right, and while we can give in Refinement, hey, this is a direction we want to go in, have players happy, that's what they want to agree, hopefully they all vote yes and it's locked in, perfect. It's still not something where like we will really know how it feels until we're all playing with it, right? Until it's implemented in the game. We've had dev work, we've had engine work with tweaks, and that particular aspect is something that we would expect to be heavily beta tested and get feedback. You know, if players don't like how certain things work with ships at sea and how they're controlled, then that is something we'd want to review. It's like the first thing we basically want to tackle with a skill. You know, apart from all the obvious stuff, like it has a skill guide and, you know, your total level goes up to 2, 3, 7, 6 and all this stuff, right? So I would expect players to be involved through every step of the way, giving feedback on that, because honestly, the worst thing for sailing would be launching sailing and the actual sailing of a ship feels really bad. And it's not an enjoyable thing, because then to me, like, we haven't lived up to what we're selling players in the skill, right? That's not what I want.
Cool. Was there anything you wanted to add to that at all, Elena?
No, not really.
Okay. All right. Well, we are at time. So before everyone goes, we've got some user-generated content that I'm going to share after I just rehash the announcements that we went over at the start of the stream. So first up, exclamation mark game update. If you haven't already, check out the post because all of the things in terms of the rewards from Desert Treasure 2 have been added to the beta worlds. So you can visit those worlds to try out a range of weapons, upgrades, armors, and all of the new prayers. So please do give it a try. On that note, we are obviously aware there's a whole bunch of feedback that's came through. We've had a shorter week this week, so we're not going to be able to make a huge amount of changes for the beta next week, but there'll be a blog early next week, at least, outlining some of the key points that we've seen, some of the changes that we want to make, and maybe some other areas that we want to get more feedback on as well. So you can look forward to that. We also have exclamation mark Discord. If you wanted to stay up to date with everything on the new skill, much like these discussions now, join our new skill Discord where you can check out feedback from other players. And we'll also be hosting stage events there as well, which you can sign up for reminders and such. So exclamation mark Discord to join that server. And then the last announcement is exclamation mark account. Just in case you missed it last week, Jagex accounts are now in open beta. It includes multi-factor authentication as well as more complex passwords. You get to keep all of your characters in one secure place. One-click login, RuneLite works on it. You can import all your settings across. You literally don't have to do anything. It should just load and work as normal. Is the most secure way to play old school. Super convenient. I love it. Exclamation mark account for information in regards to that. And then lastly, let's finish up with some nice, lovely imagery that our community have put together. So the first one here is Aquarium Attributes by Mysterious Weight 5907 from Reddit. Don't forget to arm your fish. This user's girlfriend made some lovely decorations for their fish, and she did a fantastic job. That was written in there. That was not my words. That is really cool, though.
I love
it's like
that.
one little fish just like swimming around in his paradise.
One of those fish to pick up the staff and start casting ancient magic on other fish.
Oh no. Welcome to the wilderness at sea. All right. The next one is
people asking for PvP in sailing. This is what it would look like, you know.
Yeah, I know, right? I do hope we get to put some form of PvP in sailing. That would be so cool.
That'd be cool.
Honestly, some kind of like
Dead
Dead Man's Sea. Yeah, Lawless Sea, Dead Man's Sea, some other alternative form of PvPing sounds really cool. Like I say, these are all just cool ideas for like refinement or later on, but I've seen those suggestions. Love them.
Mm-hmm. All right, the next one is a big dog. And it's actually called Getting That Enhanced Crystal Weapon Seed, but the file name was Big Doggo. All that's standing between you and that seed is one really big red dog. Absolutely love the color scheme for it. I think it looks great.
I'm really amused by that pose.
Full on going for it with the halberd.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, max hit.
It looks
yeah,
like
you always want it to be, and it just isn't. But yeah, the amount of times I've died at Hunlef because of bad RNG, definitely bad RNG, not my bad skills.
Just get good, Ayiza.
Yeah, I know. Just get good. Yeah. Just an easy case of just getting good overnight. Yep, I'll wake up and be good.
Easy.
Just like if you don't want to see people on the sea, sail away. Great. We're filled with useful insights and information today. Okay, we've now got some Flaming Bread by Super Crazy Belgian. This is obviously since the new Ruinous powers, which is the prayer in regards to faster or shorter delay between eating and attacking. But people really like the bread on fire icon from the Ruinous powers, and we now have this.
Love it.
Why is it purple though?
It's
What's in the
really
bread?
warm.
Yeah, it's just it's super bread. It's what's it called? Zaros bread. It's purple. It's just what happens.
Do you know what this is? This is like the Obama putting a medal on Obama. It's like Jagex, like, hey, we made this cool sprite. It's like, hey, look at our cool sprite.
Well, I didn't choose these images for what it's worth. So like, yeah, it's just not like someone on the old school like in the CM team tweeting on the old school Twitter account tagging me, and then everyone thinking that I've just like tweeted about myself. Like, well, I would never do that for what it's worth. It's always someone else. But every time it does, it's like, Ayiza, why are you tweeting yourself from the official account? I'm like, okay, I give up. All right, next one. This one is from Faraj Tank, and it is a PKer waiting in the Chaos Temple. Kind of want to see a full OSRS coloring book. How fun would that be? And it seems like the comments for this one had fun trying to name what gear is being worn here.
Ooh,
Really cool.
Interesting.
Big fan. We need to color it in now. We need to see a colored version. So,
Yeah.
Raj Tank,
I guess you
if
can
you're
kind of
hearing
choose the
this,
gear then, depending on like how you color it.
I guess so, yeah. Well, the chat's going wild here. Thinking Arims, a Fury, Harmorb. Nice.
That was like Zami Rose.
Oh, we've got some color production going wild.
Oh.
You know what the
Yeah,
biggest
it's
question is?
Zami Rose confirmed.
It's probably a volatile orb, but it could be any of them, right? Like someone out here PKing with an Eldritch orb, maybe.
Well, I know that there'll be no confusion over this last image that comes in from ID3A Printing, and it's a 99 ranged cape. Wait for it. Sorry, I think I went a bit too fast. Production, we're having too much fun with the colours here. Spears in my ear. Here it is. All right.
Ooh,
How cool is that?
Oh,
Very
so
clean.
sick.
Now I'm thinking I'm gonna have to, when I eventually get round to actually having an office room I can no longer have this backdrop for, and I redo my shelf with all my cool stuff, I'm just gonna have to have a set of all these. If I was just about to say, if you had to get one for every 99 that you've got, how many would you both get? But you both like maxed, and I'm the one here that's not. So like, I'm just gonna
24.
Yeah, I think I've got 3. Yeah, that'll do for me for now. Okay, well, that is the end of the live stream. It's all we have time for. Husky, Elena, you've been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me and helping me answer these questions. Chat, hope you've enjoyed the answers. We'll have more information to share with you next week. I'm going to be working on a blog that talks about refinement and next steps. So you'll be able to get more information on that. Next week's live stream is probably going to be focused around Desert Treasure 2 rewards, just because we chose this week's for the skill stuff. So lots to look forward to over the next few days. Try out the beta worlds if you haven't already. Get stuck in, see what the prayers are like. Let us know your thoughts. Give us your feedback. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day. May you have many gains and RNG be on your side, and have a great weekend. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
See ya.